If you're anything like me, you spend countless hours in front of a TV slowly rotting your brain cells away. And over the course of this prolonged brain degradation of mine, I've noticed and followed certain trends throughout the last several years of entertainment. One of these being the way television has steadily transformed from a mindless pastime to an emotionally evolved medium. So much, in fact, that the television market, and the streaming market in particular, has become oversaturated with series after series trying so hard to achieve a level of real substance and depth that they miss the mark entirely, thus dooming themselves to a world of mediocrity when they could just accept their base concept for the light-hearted, easygoing material that it can be. So, imagine my surprise when I find myself being moved to tears not once, not twice, but several times by the Apple TV Plus original series Mythic Quest. For those who don't know, Mythic Quest is a series which focuses on the headquarters of a large gaming studio. As the show develops, we see into the minds of the creators of the biggest MMORPG of all time, a game aptly titled Mythic Quest, as well as a great representation of all the moving parts it takes to run a successful video game studio. The concept is one which I was very excited about, particularly because of my love for World of Warcraft, as well as my love for the series creators, Rob McElhenney, Charlie Day, David Hornsby, and Megan Gons, who are more famous for their work on the irreverent comedy series It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. With such a comedy powerhouse behind the wheel, I expected Mythic Quest, or MQ as I'll refer to it, to walk the tightrope between impudent comedy and emotional depth that It's Always Sunny manages so well. MQ, however, looks at this tightrope, sets it on fire, and proceeds to somersault in the air between the two platforms in what is truly a death-defying display of what can happen when we free our minds of creative limitations. MQ manages to produce both some of the funniest moments of television I've ever watched and some of the most emotionally impactful scenes I've ever witnessed. Now, I'd like to take the time to share some of these moments with each and every one of you, but first, I need to tell you about a shovel. This is no ordinary shovel, however. This is a revolutionary shovel, one which brings with it an entirely new mechanic: digging. See, Poppy Lee, the lead coder at MQ, has envisioned a new world order. This will be brought upon by player-driven terraforming within the game. She has decided to bury this mechanic within the upcoming expansion, Raven's Banquet, although Ian Grimm, the creative director of MQ, is worried that the shovel isn't cool enough, so he decides it needs further working, much to the dismay of Poppy, who insists that he leave the shovel as is. Right here, in the opening minutes of the series, we get a very small but important line from Poppy, one that sets the stage for the rest of the series. As the executive producer David Brittlesby enters the room, we hear Poppy beseeching Ian. "But it's my one thing. It's just my one thing. Don't leave. Meeting's not over." Upon my first viewing, I didn't find much weight in this line. At first glance, it just seems like someone struggling to make their arrogant boss listen to reason, a theme for the show that has already presented itself within the first scene of the series. Upon closer inspection, however, I find something much deeper hidden within these lines. I find the words of someone who is desperately vying for even a small sliver of control in a situation which she's become increasingly disillusioned. I feel this way not based just on the words spoken, but largely on the manner in which they're delivered. When I first saw this scene, I mistook Poppy's tone for anger, which in this situation would be warranted. Poppy has spent the last 2 years building the code base for the new expansion, and now with the code lock deadline just days away, no one in her position would want to make unnecessary changes. This in itself would be a satisfying and understandable driving force for Poppy's character. Upon my second viewing though, I noticed that Poppy's lines here aren't delivered with anger as I had previously thought. Poppy delivers this line in an almost pleading manner. She's not angry at Ian for walking away. She's disheartened. She's not enraged at the idea of Ian changing her sole addition to the game. She's disparaged. Looking back on it, this was the first sign that maybe everything isn't quite as it seems in this show. Maybe it's more than just a workplace comedy about video games. Maybe it's about people. It's about society and the way our lives impact the lives of those around us in ways we can never expect. But wait, This is just a dumb show about the video game industry. How could it possibly achieve such a level of depth? It's late. The sun has gone down, the office has gone dark, and one by one, everyone has left the building. All that remains now are those who have been doomed to the dreaded late-night crunch. The elevator doors slide open, and Poppy enters the room, immediately greeted by a familiar voice's exasperated cries. The camera pans, and we find Ian out of his office working on the floor. As we look at Ian, we can see that on his desktop, he is trying to program the fighting mechanics with the shovel. This, of course, being the one thing Poppy adamantly protested. She takes a moment, enveloping the situation, before interjecting herself. She asks Ian why. Why must he take her one thing, this one addition she has created for herself, and change it into another one of his own ideas? It's here where both Ian and Mythic Quest let their guard down, and for a moment, we get a glimpse beyond the veil. Ian seems genuinely confused by Poppy here, as in his words, the entire game is hers. She's the one that built it. This line, as well as the following exchange, gives us a glimpse beyond the arrogant, selfish exterior that the show has set us up to expect from Ian. Instead, what we see is a man who genuinely reveres his colleague and feels as though he wouldn't be where he is without them. Poppy protests once again, saying it doesn't matter if what she's building is just another man's vision. We get a great metaphor here where she compares Ian to an artist and herself to just another paintbrush in his arsenal. This shows just how frustrated she has become with her current dynamic. She feels like she's constantly being used, a feeling I'm sure most of us have been through at one point or another. Ian is quick to rebuff this metaphor, however, claiming that Poppy isn't the brush, she's the painter. Ian sees himself as the guy standing behind the painter, telling them what to paint. Ian may be the one who dreams up the ideas for the game, but Poppy is the one who turns those dreams into reality. Without her, none of this could exist. Ian needs Poppy, and this frustrates him, but he's come to live with it, because without her, the game wouldn't be what it is. This is exactly what Poppy needed to hear. In what has now become a rather touching moment, she agrees to help Ian fix and integrate his shovel fighting mechanics. Upon viewing even now as I write this script, the scene strikes me in a strange way. It's almost as though I were sitting on top of a balloon, and the first 20 minutes of the episode were spent inflating this balloon. Then, right as Poppy steps off the elevator, a pinhole opens up on the side. Air starts escaping, but it's at such a slow rate that I hardly notice. Quickly though, the downward force of my own posterior mixed with the inward force of the latex compressing the mass of air forces the air to escape at faster rates, widening the hole, which then allows for more air to escape, and so forth, until the balloon deflates completely, and once again, I'm back in my chair. Though I had prepared myself to sit on this balloon of rising tensions and one-off gags, I find myself being gently led into something both known and unknown, something both comforting and unexpected. The first 20 minutes of the series set the viewers up for a cheeky workplace comedy a la The Office meets It's Always Sunny. Then slowly, Mythic Quest lets the air out of the balloon until what we are left with is something we never saw coming, something much more than just quick laughs and good times. Emotional growth. This conflict between Poppy and Ian is sure to rear its head once more, because just as in real life, problems in this series rarely go away with just a simple fix. Oh, and also, I've seen the whole series to date, so I kinda know what happens here. Sorry about that. As we move into episode 3, and it's at this moment you probably realize I skipped the second episode. You are absolutely right. I did. But no, I will not be explaining myself at this time. Thank you. The show takes a bit of a break emotionally as we get 24 minutes of social commentary under the guise of neo-Nazi jokes and a March Madness bracket ripped straight out of PC Delta.
Woo, no problematic language here, bro. Woo! Well, looks like things are getting all PC again. Fuck yeah, bro, easy!
This episode is great. It's the exact type and level of comedy I expected from the creators of It's Always Sunny, but I find it interesting that it took us 3 episodes to get here. Don't get me wrong, the first 2 episodes of the series are incredible. It's just so different compared to the type of series fans of RCG Productions have come to expect. I think it's really intriguing how the creators are able to slip this episode in so seamlessly, reminding us of their roots, of their ability to take something so topical or taboo and turn it into a bit of social commentary mixed in with a lot of well-deserved laughs. It's like they said, hey, I know you've come to expect a certain level of decency and depth from us you may be unfamiliar with, but don't forget, we're still the people who wrote Nightman Cometh. Notice I did say it takes a bit of a break, as the main plot does still revolve around the ongoing Poppy saga, albeit in a much more subtle way. See, it's never outright presented as this, but Poppy's latest creation for MQ, a mechanic called Dinner Party, or
Dinner Party!
is a direct result of Poppy and Ian's conversation at the end of the first episode. It's implied that Ian finally understands the importance of letting Poppy create something that is truly hers and hers alone for the game. Thus, he has given her full control of this latest edition. This is something Poppy has taken in stride, as we see how excited she is for this latest edition, right up until the launch gets ruined by a horde of neo-Nazis. Yeah, don't forget, they're still here. The Nazis slaughter Poppy's entire launch party, which just so happened to be an anti-fascist peaceful protest in the middle of an MMORPG filled with tons of powerful weapons, even more powerful spells, and a lot of angry Nazis. I'm honestly not sure how she didn't see this one coming, but I guess we'll have to chalk that up to comedic timing. After the Nazis both literally and figuratively massacre Poppy's launch, she slips into a deep depression as we see in the next shot of her. She feels so utterly defeated, but this time, it's not by Ian's hands, rather her own. By failing to strategically plan out her launch, Poppy has set herself up to fall. This mindset really hits her hard, as it's something we'll see develop throughout the course of the series. Episode 4 may be one of my favorites so far, as it manages to both feel more like a lighthearted comedy, while also subtly driving the plot in the background. But before we can talk about this episode, I must address the elephant in the room, or more accurately, the Pooty Shoe. In the first episode, we are introduced to a young streamer named Pooty Shoe, who has seemingly built his massive following by playing MQ. As such, MQHQ has become aware of Pooty, and they keep up to date with all of his videos. Pooty's role here at first is almost entirely as a plot device. He's used to establish and or carry the narrative of multiple episodes early in the series. This trope of using cutaway characters as plot devices is not a new one, rather it has been somewhat played out in recent years. What MQ manages to do with Pooty is something else entirely though, something that completely caught me off guard, in both the best and worst of ways. Now, as we get back into episode 4, we are presented with 3 converging plots, all of which seem somewhat irrelevant, in what could be described as the live-action equivalent of a filler episode if it weren't for the last 4 minutes of the episode. This is a narrative device which I kind of described in the first episode, but will see much more frequent use from here on out. For the sake of brevity, I will only be discussing Ian and Poppy's interactions in this episode, as well as for the majority of this video. I tried writing a script for this video that could envelop all of the depth and nuance in this series between every character, but the truth is, there's just too much to talk about. Well, in one video that is, so like and subscribe if you want more content like this. Alright, shameless plug over, back to the video. Episode 4 opens with Pooty on livestream, like many other episodes have by this point. Only this time, something has changed. The atmosphere is different, more soft-spoken, and almost somber. Pooty addresses his fans' concerns over why he hasn't been streaming today. As it turns out, Pooty has decided to leave Mythic Quest forever. Even though, as Pooty says, MQ will always occupy a special place in his heart, a line which I find interesting. Perhaps it's just a nod to the game that's built his name, though I doubt this for reasons we'll later discuss. He will no longer be streaming MQ in any way, shape, or form. But fear not, for Pooty has something in the works, something new and fresh, and before he ends the stream, he asks all of his fans to take this journey with him. This sparks a massive exodus of MQ players who leave for whatever game Pooty will be playing next. Because of this, Brad and Ian go to StreamerCon to find a new streamer for their game. And surprise, Poppy's here too! Much to Ian's dismay, Poppy has taken it upon herself to join him in his hunt for a new streamer, as in her words, she's a department head and she should be included in big decisions like this. This again reaffirms the building narrative we've been presented with throughout the series so far. Poppy, more than anything else in her life, just wants the respect and recognition of her peers. She wanted Ian to leave the shovel as is because in her mind, that would mean he accepts her and approves of her work. She wanted Dinner Party to be a massive success because she wants her peers both in the office and abroad to see her for the brilliant coder she really is. She has gone to StreamerCon and interjected herself into Ian's plans because she wants to be respected as the major component of MQ's success, as she always has been. Despite Brad and Ian's attempts to dissuade Poppy, she remains steadfast in being part of this new decision, so the trio set off to find a new streamer for MQ. Shortly after this, they stumble upon Pooty's booth, where it's revealed he has left them for their biggest competitor, Cold Alliance, and after Brad fails to secure his prime target to be their next streamer, the group split up to conduct their own individual recruiting. In the process of this, Poppy runs into Dan Williams from Cold Alliance Studios. Dan voices genuine respect for Poppy and her work, specifically mentioning Poppy's shovel. And though Poppy rebuffs this by stating Ian is the one who devised the fighting mechanics, Dan clarifies, stating it was the digging mechanics that he found incredible. He goes even further to ask how she knew this mechanic of persistent player-driven environmental changes would be so cool, something which Poppy has been waiting to hear from anyone for quite some time. For what may be the first time in her career, Poppy feels truly noticed and appreciated for something she created by herself. Dan ends the conversation by offering Poppy a job as her new creative director, the same position Ian currently holds at MQ. Though she seems hesitant at first, she decides to take Dan's card so that she can contact him if she so chooses. This is a huge crossroads for the series, and an even huger curveball 2/3 of the way through the episode. Up until now, it's been mostly self-contained escapades, giving the feeling that by the end of the episode, everything should wrap up nicely, and at the start of episode 5, nothing major will have changed, except maybe there'll be a new streamer at MQ. However, here, we're given a clue that maybe this episode is much more important than we initially thought. Still though, many TV shows have done something similar to this, where a main character receives a huge offer that would require them to leave or otherwise alter the show in some seemingly permanent way, only for the main character to refuse this offer at the last second, thus affirming their, and to an extent the show's, loyalty to maintaining the status quo. This could just be another trick, another fake out. Surely Ian will make another gesture towards Poppy to remind her he does value her work, and that will soothe any troubled waters that may exist, right? Right? After this chance meeting, Poppy continues through the convention. She once again runs into Ian and Brad, who have both found their candidate to be the next streamer. One is a large man in his 40s who wears an ankle monitor, and the other is a virtual Asian woman run on a laptop by a different large man in his 40s, this one sans ankle monitor. Neither of these seem ideal to Poppy, so she leaves once again to find MQ's next streamer. Just across the room, Poppy runs into Dana, the tester, who's playing Mythic for a large crowd that is amassed around her on the convention floor. Seeing this gives Poppy a great idea. Dana should be the new streamer. She rushes to tell Ian and Brad, but they shut her down immediately, without even considering the thought. Brad says Dana doesn't look like a real gamer, so that's it. This is a huge blow to Poppy, who has been vying desperately just to be heard and respected in these larger areas of Mythic Quest's business operations. As the StreamerCon crew finally return to the office, unsuccessful in their mission, they bump into David, who has been searching for Poppy all episode. See, David is scheduled for a group of young, impressionable female students to take a tour of their offices in the hopes of inspiring them to work in the coding industry. The only issue is that while the tour was scheduled for this very day, as we well know, Poppy wasn't there today. She left to go to StreamerCon, so there was no one to give the tour. Thus, David has spent the entire day giving this tour himself, on the behalf of Poppy, and when he finally sees her coming into the office, he is livid, demanding that Poppy speak to the young women in the studio. Poppy has another idea, however, as she instead introduces the group of students to Dana. Dana does exactly what Poppy suspected she would, as she is able to communicate so well with this younger generation that they become enthused at the prospect of being coders. This served to prove Poppy's point that Dana should be their new streamer, as she has the ability to connect with her audience, a vital skill to have in building and maintaining a fan base. At last, Poppy will be vindicated, as she's just shown Brad and Ian that she was right about Dana. Except, maybe not. Brad and Ian have the incredible idea to hire Dana as their new streamer, completely on their own. And when Poppy reminds them that she told them back at the convention to hire Dana, they once again completely blow her off. This seems to be the match that lit the keg, as in a rather intense display, Poppy phones Dan Williams and informs him, or rather his assistant as Dan is unavailable, that she's interested in the job as creative director. This caught me off guard upon my first watch through, as I had grown accustomed to the main character chooses loyalty over huge financial offer trope, but I'd never really prepared myself for the opposite of this, where instead of being reminded where their loyalties lie and making the decision based off that, our main character realized her loyalty had been with the wrong parties, and now she has an opportunity to rectify that. This takes place in the last few minutes of the episode, setting us up for what surely will be an explosive episode 5, where Poppy may be leaving Mythic West and joining the competition. Wait, no, that can't be right. What do you mean episode 5 has nothing to do with the main plot? Fade in. It's 1993. The camera pans around the corner of a cashier's desk, and we see two people. A man wearing jeans and a red flannel, and a woman dressed all in black, shopping for games. The woman shouts across the room at the cashier, asking if they have any games that don't suck, a comment which intrigues the other man standing to the side. The man approaches her and informs her that the game she's holding in her hands actually doesn't suck, a game called, get this guys, Midnight Justice 5, Corpse Pile. She repeats the title to him, sounding unconvinced in its quality, so the man spends the next several seconds looking through the shelf offering suggestions, only for her to rebuke every single one. Unable to find a game which pleases her taste, he asks her what kind of game she's looking for, to which she replies, something dark, something bleak and hopeless, like real life. This prompts him to respond with, oh, do you know about Dr. Robotnik and the Mean Bean Machine? He explains how it tells the story of Dr. Robotnik and his plan to kidnap the Mean Bean people to suck all of the joy out of their world, something which, in his opinion, is very real. When asked if he considered himself the Doc or the Bean in this scenario, he said, the Doc, but not because I'm evil, just because I'm a man. This line seems to amuse the woman just a little, as a smile begins to shine beneath the cracks of her dark, gothic exterior. In this moment, both the two on screen and all the viewers like me could see the sparks fly as a new relationship is formed, one which we will be following for the remainder of the episode. He asks the woman if she's ever considered making her own video game, since it appears the game she wants to play doesn't exist. She immediately responds with an enthusiastic yes, which catches the man off guard. As it turns out, he's a video game designer. In fact, he's designed games in this very store. Why don't you guys go ahead and take a guess as to which ones are his? I'll save you the trouble. It's Corpse Pile. Though he's adamant he had no idea what the name or the cover art would be, and he proclaims the actual game to be much better than it appears. This comment seems innocent, just the butt of a joke between two characters, but it contains a nice bit of foreshadowing. This is the reason he asks so many questions about what kind of game she would want to play, and he reaffirms his level of seriousness, saying he genuinely wants to know what type of game she would build. Flash forward, the year is now 1995, and our two main characters for this episode have found themselves in a meeting with a video game development agency. They show the executive a demo for their game, Dark Quiet Death, a game which consists of running for your life, armed with nothing but a flashlight to scare away the monsters chasing you, and has no way to win. The only objective is to survive. Our female protagonist seems ready to give up, as before the studio exec even has a chance to pass, she begins gathering her belongings. She says this is the part where they get denied again, thanks him for his time, and begins leaving the room. Only, the exec offers him a $300,000 advance to finish the game, news which she was not prepared for, as it sends her into a state of shock. Our male protagonist immediately takes the deal though, thus securing DQD's development and publishing. Our main characters leave the building, but not before slow dancing in the atrium of the offices. Time flashes forward once more, and it's now 1996. Our protagonists are being led through an empty office by a realtor. Our male main character asks his partner her thoughts on the space, which of course she doesn't like. We get a rather sweet moment here though, as we finally discover our characters' names, or at least their nicknames. As he's reassuring her that this is the best move for them, the man calls his partner Beans, referring of course to Dr. Robotnik in the main Bean Machine. Then, as the scene ends, a soft, uplifting violin motif begins playing, and we see Beans carving something into the pillar in the center of the space. As the camera pans around the pillar, eventually, we are given a close-up of what she carved. Doc and Bean, DQD, 96. As the camera continues panning right from the pillar, we see the office now fully furnished. Doc is leaving a meeting, and as he approaches the quote, love of his life, unquote, he notices a small problem. Beans has taken a ceremonial flashlight gifted from their publisher in Montreal and used it as a vase. Doc admonishes Beans for this, saying that she should respect the gift, that it means a lot to him. Doc continues, informing Beans about a marketing meeting he just left. Much to Beans' dismay, it seems that marketing has given the DQD sequel to some focus groups. These groups all had one major concern. They'd like to be able to kill the monsters. And this sparks a little quarrel, as Beans immediately protests. She's built a game where the atmosphere is one of impending dread. The constant fear is what drives the environment and the gameplay of DQD. In her own words, if the monsters die, the game also dies. Nevertheless, Doc insists that she review the focus group data. Beans begrudgingly accepts, and the screen fades to black. Fade in. It's now 1997. A bell tolls in the distance as we see two teenagers, one male, one female, on a couch through what appears to be a VHS tape. A hand rises from behind the couch and slowly wraps around the shoulder of one of the teenagers. She screams. The other teenager takes her aside, pulls a double-barrel shotgun out, and takes aim at the monster. He pulls the trigger, the monster's head explodes in a visceral mess, and then we hear a voiceover. Get ready for dark, quiet death. 2. It would appear that marketing has won. Though Doc and Beans both seem confused by this commercial, Beans' reaction is a little more outwardly against what the marketing team has done than Doc seems to be. Beans seems completely shocked as she reminds Doc that she agreed to guns that would dissipate the monsters, not kill them. Doc agrees, saying this is still true for the game. Beans doesn't like this, asking Doc outright, so we're lying? But again, Doc refutes, amending that they're not the ones who are lying, their game is honest. Marketing is lying to attract new customers. The argument continues as the pair leave their office and walk into another meeting, this time with development. It seems like adding the weapons has introduced a new problem for the engineering department, as the weapons wheel has become so overcrowded, what with things such as ninja stars, brass knuckles, Molotov cocktails, and the like, that it's become too difficult to maintain the flashlight in the inventory. Not to worry though, they found a solution: red dot laser sights. Beans reminds them that a laser sight is in fact not a flashlight, but apparently they tried mounting a flashlight to the rifle, only to find it looked too clunky. This thought sends Beans spiraling, as everyone in the room, including Doc, tries to convince her this is okay. She refuses to listen, stating that the addition of weapons has destroyed the quiet in Dark Quiet Death. She continues that creating environments in which a flashlight is not necessary, only a laser sight, would destroy the dark. And we already saw at the beginning of the scene that marketing is doing everything they can to take away the death. Beans is losing her game due to marketing and studio demands, and this is eating away at her. The icing on the proverbial crap cake being that Disney has reached out to them, and Doc, knowing that Beans would be adamantly against their involvement, has hidden this call's existence until now. This sparks yet another argument between Doc and Beans. As the rest of the staff leave the meeting, Doc and Beans are left fighting with each other once more, as Doc believes Disney could bring another Divergent customer base to their franchise. Beans lays into Doc for this, saying that one by one everyone is stripping away the core foundations of her game, insinuating that she alone is making her dream a reality. When Doc gives her a chance to clarify, asking if that's really how she feels, that it's her game, she affirms, saying sometimes it really does feel this way. This is a powerful moment, as it shows just how much the relationship has changed over the course of their DQD efforts. No longer is it Doc and Bean against the world, fighting to make their dream a reality. It's Bean against the world, fighting Doc for the few slivers of her dream that remain in this reality. What follows this statement can only be described as painful. Doc hits Beans with the reality that without the concessions he's made to marketing and biz dev and the like, their game wouldn't have been popular. They wouldn't have sold so many copies, they wouldn't have gotten a sequel, and they wouldn't be receiving interest in a movie from Disney. Doc has done everything for the success of their business, and in his words, without those changes, this game would have died long before it ever left her f***ing dream journal. The camera cuts to Bean's face for just a moment as she sits in silence, before cutting back to Doc as he's once again found flowers inside the flashlight. He screams at Beans this time for this, before sitting down at his desk. Beans admits he was right before delivering another decidedly morbid line towards Doc. Doc has grown tired of this behavior though, as he asks her why she has to be so morbid all the time, before telling her he's sick of it. He corrects himself, saying he didn't mean it like that, but I think the damage has been done. Doc apologizes for the mean things he said, but Beans stops him, saying he's not wrong. She admits that she's just afraid they've gotten too big too quickly, and she doesn't want to lose what makes their game special. They've lost the dark. They've lost the quiet. Doc assures her, though, that they will never lose the death. He continues, saying that nothing has changed, that it's still them all the way at the bottom against everyone at the top, just trying to make the truest game they can. In a rather sincere moment, both Doc and Beans make promises to work with one another on these issues, and things are actually looking up. As the scene ends, Doc and Beans share a sensual kiss, and the same soft violin motif from earlier begins playing once again. Then, we cut to black. The year is now 2000. We hear a voiceover. This summer, darkness will fall. A grotesque-looking monster falls out of the sky onto what appears to be a college campus. Panic ensues as a mysterious figure approaches from the background, riding a motorcycle and wearing a concealing helmet. The voiceover continues, "But one warrior will not go quietly." We can now see the mysterious motorcycle-riding hero up close, and as they dismount their vehicle, the voiceover continues again. "Let there be light." The mysterious character equips a flashlight identical to the one in Doc and Bean's office, before throwing it aside, equipping yet another double-barrel shotgun, and blasting the creature presumably back from whence it came. She then takes off her helmet, just as the voiceover returns. Tiffany Winters is Ash Light. This line here is where I realized just what had happened. See, Tiffany Winters is an actress that Disney had floated to play the lead in the movie they had previously pitched to Doc. When he told this to Beans in the previous scene, however, Beans was adamant against this thought, saying that there's no way America's sweetheart will ever play the lead in a DQD movie. In her eyes, it would be sacrilege. Right after this, we see Tiffany Winters killing multiple monsters as she walks through the scene, thus taking away the death, something else that Beans would never allow. Something is very wrong here. We then cut to see Doc driving while on the phone with Tom, one of the business execs we met in the previous scene. He informs Doc that the movie is such a huge success, Disney has already greenlit a sequel, and the game sales are up 35%. This seems to be music to Doc's ears, as he tells Tom he and his lady have earned a celebration. Tom tells Doc to enjoy his trip before hanging up, and soon after, Doc pulls over to pick up Beans. Except she's dressed in light clothes and she appears to have blonde hair, not black, and she's giggling as she's getting into the car, and oh my god, this isn't Beans at all. This is Tiffany Winters. Talk about subverting expectations. Now we know why so much has changed for DQD in the past 3 years. It's because Beans wasn't there to protect it any longer. This realization hit me hard upon my first watch through. Even though looking back now, I should have seen this coming. I guess I just genuinely wanted to believe that these two could work through their differences, separate the work from their relationship, and live happy, fulfilling lives with each other. This isn't the case, however, as it seems Doc and Beans have gone their separate ways. Tiffany Winters gets into the passenger seat of Doc's car, and they drive into the sunset. We then cut to a widescreen format as we're shown a clip of what is presumably the DQD movie. In this scene, we see a little fuzzy, cartoonish looking creature playing with a yo-yo. The camera cuts to Doc, who is visibly confused, but we hear someone in the background laughing hysterically, someone who was later revealed to be Tom. The camera focuses once more on the purple fuzzy guy before panning around the room as we hear Tiffany Winters reprimanding this creature by name, calling it Roscoe on the screen. As the camera continues panning, we see both Doc and Tom in what is now just Doc's office, confirming that Beans not only left Doc, but she's left the studio. Tom informs Doc that Montreal likes Roscoe, that they think there's room to expand his role in the DQD universe, i.e. through their games. This is something that Doc vehemently protests, stating there's no place for Roscoe in the new games. Roscoe is a kid's character, and DQD isn't a kid's game. Except, according to Tom, that's not entirely true anymore. Since the movie was released, there has been a huge surge in players aged 8 and younger, something which Tom and Montreal wish to lean into. Doc again protests this idea. He adamantly denies this and any other changes that would revolve around catering their growing younger fan base. In the standoff between Tom and Doc that eventually develops into a full-blown ultimatum, Doc looks Tom dead in the eyes and says it's either Roscoe or him. Well, it's Roscoe! It's not just Roscoe, though. It's Deep Sea Roscoe, Safari Roscoe, Princess Roscoe, Arctic Attack Roscoe, and even Rappin' Roscoe with Boombox. Yeah, it seems the game's final remaining co-creator has been ousted, forever replaced by an animated Muppet. The screen fades to black once more. It's now 2006. We find ourselves once again following Doc through a video game store. Here, he looks upon the shelves only to see Roscoe on the cover of his very own video game. As he mutters to himself about this, Beans approaches him from the background. She stands behind him for a moment before announcing her presence. I hate that snaggletooth shit, she dejects, but he did pay for my veneers. I went with the full set of wooden dentures, he responds, not looking away from the game. Oh yeah? Well, that's just practical and sustainable. I applaud that, actually. Hey, Bean. Hey, Doc. They giggle and they hug before immediately connecting over the current abysmal state of the gaming industry, much as they had when they first met. As they go down the shelf, trashing every game, Doc comes across one called Barrel Ape Madness, which, as it turns out, Beans has actually purchased. She shows him the game in her bag before telling him it is indeed a pile of shit, but it shuts her kids up, so it's worth it. After this, we get a great bit of dialogue where, after making fun of Doc's now ex-Tiffany Winters, Beans apologizes, only for Doc to tell her, in one of the most sincere moments I've ever witnessed, Beans, I'm the one who's sorry. They both stand in silence for an uncomfortably long second before Beans says to Doc, you know, if you're not finding the game you want to play, maybe you should make it yourself. To which she replies, I just might. Then, only a moment later, Beans says her goodbyes. As she walks out of the store, Doc picks up a copy of the original DQD out of the discount bin. Upon picking this up, the same violin motif from earlier plays once again, and Doc is flooded with the memories of his past. We see Doc and Beans standing in their unfurnished studio. We see the signature that Beans carved into the side of the column. And then, we get one more momentary glimpse at when Doc and Beans first met. We see Doc as he ponders on these memories just for a moment, before handing the game to someone else in the store. He tells them they should buy it, that it's a really good game, and then he leaves. The camera pans back onto Roscoe before fading to black, and as Un Année Sans Lumière plays in the background, tears begin to roll down my cheeks. Even now, as I'm typing this out, this is the first point where Mythic Quest manages to break me, but it won't be the last. This may be the single most powerful end to an episode in TV history, except it's not quite the end of the episode, as after a couple in-credit cards play, we fade back in. The year is now 2010. We hear Ian's voice and pan over to see him as he pitches MQ to the same man who published DQD all those years ago. Finally, 34 minutes and one in-credits fake out later, we understand the connection between our story and the DQD story. Upon my first watch through, I found it an interesting choice creatively to have this complete side story in the middle of what's building to be the climax of the season. What with the last episode ending with Poppy and Tox to leave Mythic Quest for their largest competitor, to be honest, I had a hard time understanding why the writers would deliberately interrupt the flow of the story like this. That is until I understood exactly what this episode was. It's not just a somewhat related story about two video game designers who fall in and later out of love due to their shared passions. It's a story about how two people can become so enveloped in what they think is the right thing that they completely lose sight of all that matters. It's this theme that is built upon throughout the rest of the season, and by extension, the rest of the series. And after watching the rest of the series through, I really don't think this episode could fit as well or pack as big of a punch if it were in any other order. I'm gonna be honest here, I'm not really sure how to bridge back into the main plot after that. Episode 5 is just so earth-shattering that I feel lost now, like the rest of this video serves no purpose, as this one episode single-handedly displays all of the values I've been writing about thus far. Well, I guess that means video's over now. That's right, video's over. No, don't look at the bottom of your screen. Stop. Don't look at that runtime. I don't care what it says. The video's over. We're done. You're done. Don't just sit on YouTube for another hour listening to me rant needlessly about how great this TV show is. Go outside. Get some fresh air. Listen to the birds chirp. Play with your dogs. Enjoy the time you have left on this earth. Alright, I know. I can't just end it there. We still have to talk about Poppy. As episode 6 begins, we find our favorite female coder folded over onto her keyboard, drool dribbling down her chin as she appears to be fast asleep. Poppy, as always, has been working so hard to ensure MQ's success that she once again neglected her own personal needs, except this time, she seems more displeased than usual with her forced late night. As she wakes up, she informs her subordinates that she's leaving to take a shower and prepare for a lunch later in the day. Two things Poppy is, well, not known for. Not only does Poppy present herself at various points in the show as someone who neglects to shower regularly, she's also presented as someone who's rather antisocial. It's a bit out of character for Poppy to be worried about her hygiene, even more so for her to be preparing for a social event. To see her undergoing both at once can only mean one thing. This lunch is very important to her. I wonder who she could be meeting with that would be so important. Well, as it turns out, that would be Dan Williams. Poppy has come for a tour of Cold Alliance Studios, and as the two walk side by side through what proves to be an alternate reality for Poppy, she begins to realize something very troubling. Mythic Quest is broken. Ian has mismanaged his studio so much to the point that their employees' perceptions have been warped. See, in the very first episode, we learned that Ian had his office raised above everyone else's intentionally, so that he could lord over his subordinates in an unspoken display of power. This, along with many other unusual business practices, have shaped Poppy's perception on what a normal workplace environment looks like. Almost as though it's all she's ever known, Poppy holds steadfast to Ian's own version of studio management, expecting this new studio to be run very similarly. She's caught off guard by the fact that Cold Alliance conducts their business with such a sense of professionalism and mutualism, where they hold themselves to a high standard while also supporting their own employees. This idea excites Poppy, as it seems it never occurred to her that she could actually enjoy her workplace environment and feel comforted by her surroundings instead of stressed. This idea seems to be confirmed, as when Poppy passes a mirror, she takes a moment to study her neck, only to find the stress-induced hives which have been plaguing her all episode as she worked to save MQ have suddenly disappeared. For once in her professional life, Poppy feels comfortable and accepted in the workplace. This idea brings a well-deserved smile to her face. As Poppy returns to MQ HQ, she notices that her hives have reappeared just as quickly as they went away, an omen of what is to come. As she exits onto the elevator of the main floor, she's greeted with a bitter reminder of the differences between the two studios. The office staff stand around Ian and CW as they take turns smashing an AC with a baseball bat in a beautiful homage to one of my all-time favorite movies, Office Space. When she asks David what's going on, he rather nonchalantly catches her up to speed, acting as though this is all normal, that it's just another day at work, because for them, it is. His complacency with the situation around him all but shocks Poppy, as she can now see the true scope of the situation she's found herself in. This studio is a disaster, and every day that the status quo is kept brings the studio one step closer to total collapse. Poppy realizes this, and she realizes that she doesn't want to be around when that happens, so she has to get out before it's too late. The next episode continues immediately where episode 6 left off, and in the opening scene, Ian once again brandishes his almost psychotic managing tactics, something that finally cinches the situation for Poppy. She realizes this is it. If she's going to escape, it's now or never. So she phones Dan Williams once more, this time to accept his offer. She is leaving. She is free. Except, not quite yet. MQ has been hacked, and one of their most powerful NPCs has been hijacked. This is a major crisis, and Poppy feels obligated to see them through to the end of this, as without her coding expertise, they may collapse. This time though, Poppy's attitude is different. She doesn't seem stressed or concerned with MQ's issues, more so amused. She has stayed along to ensure the code necessary to catch the hacker is up to snuff, but for once, the coding is where her job ends. Everything else going on around her is just a bonus, as we see Poppy embracing the situation, laughing hysterically, and even escalating Ian's antics instead of protesting them as she would have in the past. This is the first time potentially in her entire life that Poppy has decided to cut loose, and it is definitely the first time in her career where she has given up on reining Ian in, as even Ian says he's loving this new Poppy. Instead of yelling at him for acting so nonchalant or telling him to get out of the mocap booth and do some real work, she's actually joined him, and she seems to be having a great time. This is the point of the series where I begrudgingly accepted the future. I was forced to come to terms with the fact that Poppy is done. She's given up on Mythic Quest, and though she deserves to do whatever she feels necessary to ensure her own well-being, this acceptance did not come easy for me. Poppy has quickly become one of my favorite characters, not only in the show, but in all of fiction. Accepting she's moving on so early in the series came bittersweet for me. Except, maybe she's not? Immediately after this scene, we see Poppy and Ian dueling in-game. Poppy has decided to train Ian for plot reasons that I'd rather leave vague, so maybe y'all will go back and watch the series if you haven't already. And after a beautiful training montage, the stage is set for Poppy to complete her last task as lead engineer for MQ. Except, as she walks into Ian's office for what could be the last time, she's reminded why she came to MQ in the first place. As she runs Ian through the process they'll be using to catch the hacker, he tells her, "That's great, but do you know what the best part of this has been? You and me, doing it together. Old Ian and Poppy, you know? Like the old days. No fear, no anxiety. You were happy." Yeah, I guess I was. She responds as she remembers the good times, the times when they weren't constantly at war, when they were just two people trying to build the best game in the world. This thought seems to shake her previous convictions, and as the episode winds to a close, we'll see that it stays with her. Facing a crowd of thousands cheering them on, Ian and Poppy are able to find and publicly reveal the identity of their hacker to be none other than Booty Shoes himself. As the crowd cheers for Ian, he grabs Poppy from her desk, brings her to the front of the stage, and leads the audience in cheering her name. They're both so elated with this huge win, and as they celebrate taking in the atmosphere, Poppy gets a text from Dan Williams. This time, however, she seems more hesitant to answer. After the last several hours she spent with Ian, reconnecting, rediscovering her passion for her job, she seems to be having second thoughts. This seems to be confirmed, as the next episode opens with Poppy on the phone with Dan, though it turns out she has yet to give her resignation notice to MQ or confirm an exact start date with Cold Alliance, possible evidence that she is indeed feeling hesitant towards leaving. She tells Dan she's on her way at this very moment to tender her resignation, only as she enters Ian's office, she finds him on the couch, utterly dejected. The scene cuts away, and when we come back, we see Poppy, now riding in the passenger seat of Ian's car. Poppy tries valiantly to sway the conversation in the direction of her resignation, but Ian cuts her off rather abruptly as he has something he needs to say. He starts, "You know, my real name is Ian?" Ian is my dad's name. He is not a good dude. He pulls his sleeve up and he brings his right arm just in front of Poppy's eyes, and then he continues. That is a cigarette burn I got for not turning the Nintendo off in time. You have any experience with that? Poppy lets out a meek no before Ian continues. It's not great. Anyway, one day I decided I didn't want his name anymore, so I started calling myself Ian. This secret Ian has carried with him throughout his whole life. This secret he himself created is the foundation of who Ian is. Ian was so scarred by his father, both mentally and physically, that he became determined to break the mold his father cast and become something new. He was so starved for love and acceptance that he built himself into a person who thought so highly of himself he would never need to rely emotionally on others, ever again. Ian is broken, and he has built walls surrounding him to protect himself from the dangers of the outside world, the dangers that come along with trusting and loving others. He saw the damage his father had on himself and his mom, and he decided he would never go through that again, no matter the cost. That is, until this very moment. He lets his defenses down for just a minute as he shares this very painful, very real story with Poppy. Why would he do this after all this time? Does he realize he's about to lose the only person he truly cares about and possibly the only friend he's ever had? Or is he just trying to express something he's never been able to express before, searching for peace of mind? Maybe there's something deeper here. Maybe he's telling Poppy something more than just the words spoken. Perhaps he's giving her a glimpse into why he is the way he is. Sort of an apology, or as close as he can manage, for the way he's treated her all these years. Maybe he's finally come to the realization that by building these walls around himself, he's alienated and actively hurt the ones around him, the ones he cares about the most. This last theory seems to be correct, as a moment later, Ian speaks again. He laments to Poppy, saying he knows he doesn't say it enough, but that he values her and the work she does. He tells her he's going to try harder to voice his appreciation. He promises that he'll do better. This is all Poppy wanted. This is all she's been begging for since the beginning of the series. But of course, it had to come right as she was preparing to leave MQ for good, testing her resolve once again. This time, however, it seems that Ian and MQ have won out. Ian and Poppy pull into the parking lot of a diner, and as Ian exits the vehicle to enter the diner for some vaguely suspicious reason, Poppy wishes him luck. This prompts Ian to turn around, and as he leans in through the driver's side window, he looks at Poppy and he thanks her. What's more, he calls her his partner. At long last, Poppy has achieved her dreams. She is being fully respected, validated, and appreciated by the one person who for so long has been both the source and bane of her existence. Throughout the past 8 years, Poppy has worked for Ian, trying to please him. Now she finally feels like she's working with Ian, which has been her dream for even longer. This feeling of validation is so strong, it prompts Poppy to phone Dan Williams once more, this time informing him, or rather his voicemail, that things have changed and she has decided to stay with MQ. In a rather touching moment, she tells him, "If I'm being honest with myself, this is exactly where I need to be right now." Finally, after fighting for so long, she's gotten exactly what she needed, and things are looking up. Right up until the mother of Ian's child approaches Poppy and brings her crashing back down to reality. As she's sitting in the parking lot waiting for Ian to return, a woman approaches Poppy's side of the vehicle. Upon talking to this woman, who identifies herself as Shannon, Poppy discovers a few things. First and foremost, Ian has a kid. That's why they're here right now. He's meeting with his son. Secondly, this kid is Pootieshoe, the very same Pootieshoe who used to stream Mythic daily, the very same Pootieshoe who just got revealed publicly as the hacker. Thirdly, and perhaps the most earth-shattering information she attains, is that Ian has been manipulating her all day. As Shannon puts it, he knows how to shine his light on you, right? And make you feel like you are the most important person in the world. And then, when you're feeling safest, he shines that light somewhere else. Mostly on himself. Then, the second it seems like you may be onto something better, he can sense it, and that light comes right back to you. This hits Poppy like a ton of bricks, as she realized this is exactly what he's done with her today. Just as she was ready to leave and put herself into a better, healthier situation, he tells her exactly what he knows she's been dying to hear this entire time. He brings her back into the fold. He convinces her things will change, when in reality, everything remains the same. Poppy, now sober to the reality Ian has placed her in, decides enough is enough, for real this time. She calls Dan Williams one last time and recants her previous voicemail, saying she is ready to leave MQ for good. As she ends the call, hoping that she reached him in time, Ian approaches from the background. Upon seeing him, Poppy is upset. She grills Ian, asking if there's anything he wants to share with her, and when he refuses, she tells him about the conversation she's just had with Shannon. She asks him why he brought her all the way out here if he wasn't going to tell her what was going on, to which he responds, for support. This line could be taken one of two ways. Looking from the perspective of someone who's been through many trials and tribulations throughout my life, I can sympathize with Ian here. I think most people could, and that's the point. Ian is finally being humanized. He's finally being portrayed as more than just an egotistical narcissist. He's seen here as someone who's given up on the masquerade and admitted his weakness. He needs Poppy here because he can't do it alone. He needs emotional support to get through what is a very tough time for him. Only, this is exactly what Shannon told Poppy he does. Poppy doesn't see a broken man reaching out for a helping hand in front of her. She sees a manipulative man hell-bent on keeping her from leaving at all costs. All she can think about are the words of Shannon, mixed with her own memories of being used, abused, and degraded by the hands of the man standing before her. And this breaks her. I'm honestly not sure which of the two versions of Ian stood before her at this moment. Perhaps both, or perhaps neither. Truthfully, it doesn't matter, as in the end, who Ian is at this moment doesn't change who Ian has been the last 8 years. It doesn't change the pain he has put her through, or the struggles he has caused. It doesn't change the damage he has done to her psyche. Ian may be broken, but Poppy is too, and she has been broken by Ian's hands. At this moment, any version of Ian could have been standing before her. He could have said anything here, and it wouldn't change a thing. Poppy has had enough. She begins laying into him, telling him about a dog she saw earlier trapped in a car, before continuing that she won't be his emotional support animal anymore, that she refuses to be his lapdog. Ian, seemingly more dejected than before, begs Poppy not to do this right now. He doesn't have the energy to fight anymore. Between the meeting with his son and now this argument with Poppy, he seems resigned, completely defeated. Poppy agrees with Ian, telling him he's right, that they shouldn't do this anymore. And then, she quits. She informs him that she's going to work as a creative director for Cold Alliance, and when she asks him how he feels about that, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he'll show genuine remorse, or anger, or sadness, or anything at all not being fabricated, what she gets is something else entirely. Looking for an emotional response or any sort of rise from Ian, instead, she finds acceptance. Ian calmly and quietly responds, saying, if that's what you want to do, I can't stop you. This time, though, it seems his acceptance is no longer valuable to her, as when she asks and he confirms that yes, this is how he feels about her departure, she blows him off with a simple, whatever man, before telling him to get in the car. Right as this happens, though, Poppy spots the dog she referenced earlier, and as she points it out to Ian, he asks her why she hates dogs so much, completely missing the point of her previous analogy. This seems to be the last ignorant remark that Poppy can handle, however, as she once again has become engulfed in the rage she has quietly stored for 8 years. Her eyes glowing with anger, she looks at Ian. I don't hate dogs. Listen to me very carefully, Ian. I hate you. The anger, the resentment, the frustration, the sheer power that this line is packed with incites a visceral reaction deep within me as I feel my muscles tense up and my forehead grow hot. With this one line, I felt the 8 years of pent-up emotions pouring out of Poppy. With this one line, I've gotten over any bitter feelings I had towards Poppy leaving MQ for their largest competitor. With this one line, I understood. I understood why Poppy reacts the way she does to Ian, not just in this scenario, but throughout the series. Poppy really, truthfully, Loves Ian? Well, that can't be right. Okay, bear with me. I know what you're thinking. But Sofa King, Poppy literally just told Ian that she hates him. Why would you say that she loves him? The answer is simple. Well, it may not be simple, but it is easy. Love and hate are two very strong emotions, perhaps the strongest emotions we as humans can experience. Furthermore, both love and hate derive from the same beginnings. Love is born out of desire, out of a need unfulfilled, as is hate. Love spawns in the absence of contentment, as does hate. Love often finds us when we are at our lowest, searching for a reason behind the madness that drives our world, as does hate. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that it would be impossible to feel hate without feeling love. In order to feel such a strong rage towards someone, there must be a reason why you would think about them so frequently. It may not be love in a typical sense, or even love for the person in question at all. But if you look deep enough, you'll find love is the driving force behind all great hatreds, and vice versa. This could mean that a shared hatred brings two people together in love. Or it could mean that the love you have for someone drives you to hate someone else who has wronged them. In this case though, I find the relationship between love and hate to be more personal. To see why though, we must first answer the question, why does she hate Ian? Sure, it could just be for making her job hell, and that would be justified. Though, if this were the case, I feel like the way she delivers the words here would be different. I could be reading too deeply into this interaction, but the emotion behind the words she says, the way she delivers each word as its own statement, that feels more powerful than someone just telling their boss off. She gives each word its own space because she wants to be sure that he understands exactly what she's saying. I, Poppy Lee, head engineer at MQ and your personal confidant for the last 8 years. The one person who knows you better than anyone else in this world. The only person who has lived to bring your every dream into a reality. The only person who cares about you even a fraction of the amount you care about yourself. Hate, detest, despise, loathe, abhor. You, Ian Grimm, the person I have devoted my life to. The person I have bent over backwards to serve for the past 8 years. The person who has served both as my inspiration and my mentor. The person who has shaped my idea of what art can be. The person who has simultaneously given me everything to live for, and yet taken away everything I didn't know I even cared about. Poppy feels so let down, so disgusted, so betrayed by the one person she genuinely cared about. You can't reach that level of caring, or that level of hatred for someone, without loving them first. She doesn't hate him for making her life miserable, she hates him for giving her life meaning. She hates him for showing her what art and an artist can be, and then slowly stripping this ideal away from her until, just like Shannon, she was left lost and alone, searching for the light once more. She hates him for being the best and worst thing that's ever happened to her. She hates him for making her love him. The duo get back into the car and head towards the office. They arrive in the parking lot, but as Poppy goes to leave, she notices Ian, unmoving, slumped in the passenger seat. "Are you coming?" Poppy asks, almost concerned. "No," Ian responds, his voice laden with equal parts resignation and dejection, as he speaks into the side of the car, remaining totally still. This further upsets Poppy as she asks him, "You're just gonna sit in the car like a child?" "I guess," Ian responds, still unmoving, his dejection unwavering. Poppy, now completely fed up with his childish behavior, lets him know just that. She lays into him once more, spouting that she's glad she's leaving for Cold Alliance because, in her words, at least she'll have a voice. They're gonna serve her vision. Maybe she won't have the same creative freedom Ian has, but at least she won't have to deal with the physical and mental manifestations of her dread brought on by the mere thought of Ian and MQ. She exits the vehicle and slams the door. As she storms away, presumably towards the rest of her life, her phone rings. It's Dan Williams. Poppy is obviously flustered, but as she answers the phone, she voices how excited she is to begin working for Cold Alliance, and for the first time, there's no sense of hesitation or resentment, as if she's just doing this because she's upset with Ian. For the first time, she seems genuinely excited simply by the prospect of this new start. I find it interesting what they do with Poppy's character here, specifically how they portray her relationship with Cold Alliance in MQ throughout the past few episodes. The way her character matures in real time as she begins to see the world beyond MQ that she's been blind to for so long reminds me of the way a domestic abuse victim may seek to escape a rough situation. Keep in mind, I'm speaking simply from my own observations throughout life, and in no way do I intend to overgeneralize the trials of victims of abuse. Every story is different, and every person faces a unique struggle. That being said, I've noticed similarities in those I've seen go through an abusive relationship. Oftentimes, the victim of an abusive relationship may stay with their significant other throughout all the pain and harm that he's inflicted upon them because it's all they've ever known. Since they have no other standard to compare the relationship to, they perceive the relationship to be normal. And in some relationships, the same dysfunctionality that causes these warp ideals to form also prevents them from finding anything else to compare it to. This dysfunctionality, and again, this is from my own personal experience, can manifest in the form of deep-rooted control issues where the abuser limits the victim's freedoms. Slowly, they're stripped away until the victim isn't allowed to leave the home or even interact with certain people without the permission of the abuser. Because of this alienation, the victim may not have an opportunity to see other, healthier relationships, thus they have no reason to believe their relationship is abnormal. Once the victim is finally able to get into the real world and see how different typical relationships are, however, things begin to change. Given a chance in the real world, victims may finally begin to realize what a farce their lives are compared to the rest of the world. This doesn't happen all at once though. It starts with a conversation. Maybe someone new, maybe someone they haven't spoken to in years. As the victim begins conversing with this being of the outside world, they start to notice discrepancies between their own experiences and this new voice. This makes the victim think. Over time, they may get out more and more, questioning more of the world. This may continue until the victim befriends another couple. As the victim becomes closer with them, they see their relationship and realize just how much easier it is, how much healthier it must be for both of them. Just as Poppy spent 8 years waiting to feel appreciated for her work, only for Dan Williams to give her this praise upon their first meeting, victims of abuse can go their whole lives thinking they're unworthy of any such praise or appreciation, only to see someone else praise their significant other so freely. This can serve as a sort of culture shock, bringing into question everything the victim has thought up until this point was normal. The next big change can come when the victim not only sees a healthy relationship, but a healthy home. As they begin to understand that a home isn't a place where everyone hates everyone and no one is happy, or a place where good thoughts go to die and our innermost demons come out, they see instead that a home is supposed to be a safe place, a place where everyone can and should feel comfortable. This is very similar to what Poppy experiences as she tours Cold Alliance Studios. As you'll remember, she was quite impressed by the office's atmosphere. Instead of being designed around one man's narcissistic ego, serving only to fuel his delusions and devolve those around him, the office is quiet, productive, and most of all, mature. Poppy realizes she actually feels comfortable here, which makes her realize that her workplace environment is supposed to be comfortable, and if it's not, then something's wrong. This isn't enough though, as just as in cases of abuse, the victim, in this case being Poppy, can't get out yet. Or more accurately, she won't get out yet. Though she understands things are unhealthy, she feels attached to Ian and MQ. She's hesitant to officially take the job at first because she's not sure if she really wants to leave MQ. Even after returning to MQHQ and finding the chaos that had unfolded in her absence, she doesn't accept Dan's offer quite yet. Perhaps it's just because she was scared to leave, or perhaps it's because part of her really did want to stay. The reasoning is irrelevant. Even after she finally accepts Dan's offer, Poppy is still hesitant to resign from MQ. Again, this could be due to fear of upsetting Ian, or for her caring about Ian and MQ as a whole. But again, the reasoning is unimportant. Just as victims of abuse are often inclined to do, Poppy stays until the very end, until she absolutely cannot take another drop of Ian's abuse. This only makes the situation harder, as it makes Poppy's decision much tougher than it should be. Instead of seeing the relationship objectively like she was able to while touring Cold Alliance Studios, as she sticks around Ian, she's reminded of why she came in the first place. She becomes so nostalgic for the old times, the good times, that she doesn't even realize even those times were flawed. Finally, though, after all the waffling and reminiscing, she summons the courage to take the life raft out in front of her and bring herself to safety. Doing this feels like a weight taken off her back, as now that she knows her future is safe, she lets go of all of the emotions, all the pain, all the suffering, all the rage she has been forced to endure and store over the past 8 years. She is finally able to tell her abuser, in this case Ian, that she is done, and what's more, she hates him. She hates him for everything he's put her through and everything he's ever said. She hates him for making her believe that things were normal, that things were okay, that he loved her the way she loved him. She is done. She is truly free. Except, she's not. Just like in too many cases of domestic abuse, by the time she finally found the courage to escape, it was too late. As her phone call with Dan Williams continues, he informs her that he doesn't think she's the right candidate for the position. In a moment I can only describe as heartbreaking, he tells her that he respects her talent immensely, but that her artistic temperament isn't a fit. Ian has won. Ian has broken Poppy so much that she can't work in a different environment. She has been stunted and formed into a version of herself where, by other people's standards, she is too volatile. Poppy pleads with Dan, begging him to understand her situation. She tells him that she's the grounded one where she's coming from, but it's not enough. Dan Williams speaks once more. "I'm sorry, Poppy. Goodbye." The call ends, and Poppy is left standing motionless in the garage. Ian, being the at best apathetic and at worst sociopathic person that he is, approaches Poppy from behind. He tells her he heard everything. He continues, spouting, "That sucks," before saying that he'll see her inside. As Ian leaves the shot, we are left with Poppy standing alone in the garage. Her eyes begin to bulge out of her head, and she starts screaming. The credits roll. I'd like to take a moment here before we go any further and just reflect on the journey we've taken so far, more accurately the journey Poppy has undergone so far. Here we are, only 8 episodes into the series, and we've already witnessed such harrowing character progression. No longer is she just a level-headed coder, simply fighting for her own addition into a game that is fast becoming her life's work. No longer is she simply happy with the idea of her own small expansion within MQ, just living for the moment when she can say dinner party was her idea, her creation. No longer is she the impassioned and integral member of MQ, just fighting for the recognition of her peers, fighting desperately for her seat at the table. Nor is she even the mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted individual, just desperate for her own escape, despite her own misguided nostalgia. Instead, here at the end of the 8th episode of the first season of the series, we see someone else entirely, someone who is lost, someone who has lost, someone who is broken, someone who has been broken. The woman who stands before us is screaming as the episode fades to black, because much like the picture on our TV, she is fading too. She feels it, the pain of losing herself. She is no longer Poppy Lee. She is a prisoner. As episode 9 opens, we find ourselves once again face to face with Poppy. Only this time, instead of sleeping off another long night going above and beyond her duties as head engineer of MQ, we find her emotionless, drawing bars on the windows of her office. It seems she has begrudgingly accepted her fate as a prisoner, one both to Ian and her own mind. Ian enters her office, and after a few classic Ianisms, he tells her that he knows things have been weird recently, but he knows how to fix it. He has 2 words for Poppy, and these 2 words are going to change everything. Blood Ocean. That's it. Problem solved. No need to worry about the damage Ian has caused to Poppy's psyche or whether she will ever be able to repair herself enough to escape Ian's grasp, let alone how she is supposed to become healthy enough to leave MQ when the whole reason she was leaving was for her own well-being in the first place. No need to fret whether Poppy will ever achieve the level of acceptance and reverence she not only deserves but needs desperately. No, all that goes away with these 2 words. What is Blood Ocean, you may ask, just like Poppy did? Well, Ian's not really sure, but it sounds cool, right? This obviously doesn't satisfy Poppy, as she asks, why are you so happy? Didn't you just have a massively unsuccessful reunion with your estranged son? Now you come bouncing in here wanting to talk about a new feature? This is a great series of questions, honestly. But once again, what I find intriguing is not the words spoken here, rather the tone they're spoken with. If this were any other episode in the series to this point, Poppy would be livid whilst delivering these lines, justifiably too, as she has a plethora of reasons to be angry with Ian. Instead, what I find so interesting here is how she delivers these lines with no inflection whatsoever. There's no anger, there's no resentment, no pleading, no bewilderment, no disdain, no despair, nothing. She says these words, but she doesn't feel them. She doesn't feel anything. It's as if she's going through the motions, reminding Ian of what happened, playing the role of his own personal devil's advocate because she knows that's what she would normally do in this scenario, but there's no emotion behind it. She's not saying these things because she's upset with him or bewildered by Ian's unchanging narcissistic behavior. She's saying them because she knows she normally would say them, because she normally would feel so strongly about what she said that she'd have to voice it. This shows just how much damage Ian has caused, as Poppy can't even muster the energy to feel the things she knows she should feel. She can't even be angry with Ian for what he's done, because he took away her ability to be angry. Now all she can do is say the things she knows she would, do the things she knows she should, accepting that she will never be okay again. Ian, of course being the person he is, missed everything Poppy asked him, except for the word feature, a wonderful display of the powers of selective hearing. This prompts him to respond with a question of his own, asking Poppy, I don't know, is it a feature? Before rambling a bit on what Blood Ocean could be. Poppy, now becoming slightly annoyed, tells him to let her know when he figures out what Blood Ocean is so she can code it because she has no control over her work or her life. She's just trapped here. This is something which Ian takes in stride, as he says he loves this new Poppy before leaving her office to work on Blood Ocean once more. It's late. We cut into an apartment building facing the front door. Just outside, on the other side of the door, there's a knocking, no, a pounding. The doorbell chimes frantically as we hear the muffled yells of a familiar voice calling out, Poppy, Poppy, let me in. Poppy enters the frame, and as she opens the door, on the other side stands who else but Ian. Hey, we gotta talk. Blood Ocean. He continues, but before he can finish his thought, Poppy gives a hearty no and begins to shut the door, only for Ian to worm his way into her apartment. Despite her protest, Ian begins to tell Poppy that while he was in the hospital receiving treatment for an infection he obtained by cutting his finger open before walking into the ocean while on a vision quest, he figured it out. Blood Ocean is a disease. Ian, Poppy mutters, shaking her head in disbelief. That is actually pretty good. Ian explodes with joy at the sound of this. He tries to get Poppy into her home workstation, but she refuses. As he begins ushering her forward, she spins around and cuts him off. No, I can't do it anymore. Again, she delivers this line not with a sense of despair or anger. Rather, here she sounds almost pragmatic. She's not pleading with Ian to stop acting this way or to just leave her alone altogether. Instead, she's simply stating that she is incapable of doing this again. She cannot build his disease. She cannot make yet another one of this narcissistic 40-year-old man-child's dreams a reality. She cannot waste another night of her life satisfying the whims of someone who will never understand just how much he has irreparably damaged her. Ian, perhaps now beginning to see where Poppy is coming from, or perhaps just trying to quell the flames once more, responds. Pop, I know that I can be difficult to deal with, but so can you. We're like the Beatles, you know? Big egos clash and we fight all the time, but you can't deny that together, we make masterpieces. Right now, there are 11 million people playing Mythic Quest. 11 million people could be doing anything with their lives, and they're choosing us. Poppy, you can't give up. The world is better with the Beatles in it, and you know it. The Beatles, huh? Poppy looks up at Ian, her eyes deep in thought. Yeah, the Beatles. Sure, I can write the lyrics and the music and everything, but it would sound completely different without the drums. This comparison infuriates Poppy, and though I can't support the slander, I can appreciate the sentiment. Now incensed, Poppy responds, "Wait, I'm Ringo?" To which Ian retorts, "Well, yeah, of course you're Ringo. Someone has to keep the beat." This completely sets Poppy off as she lays into Ian once more. Oh my god, you can't even give me one of the good Beatles." Ian attempts to de-escalate, recanting his metaphor, telling her it's not the Beatles, it's something else, but it's too late. "No, it is. It's whatever you say it is. It's the Beatles. I'm a paintbrush. You're the creative director, so we're all just held hostage to your every whim. That's why it's always going to be your world. Your staff are revolting. Mythic Quest is crumbling around you. You are so self-absorbed that you can't see you're fucking this game up just like you fucked up your kid." Ian and Poppy are left silent for an uncomfortably long second. Poppy tries to backtrack, muttering a soft, "No, it's no use though." "You're right," Ian murmurs. "No, I didn't mean that. It's okay, you're right. I'm sorry." Ian exits the room, and the screen fades. It's now morning. Poppy enters Ian's office, silently carrying a laptop. She places it on his desk and opens it, facing Ian. The screen powers on, and we find a nondescript player character within the MQ game engine. The character model appears to be sick as it shakes and groans in pain. Suddenly, a viscous red substance begins spewing out of, multiple orifices, and the camera zooms out as Poppy begins to speak. It's contracted through contact with a certain elven species. As the camera pans over, we find a mass crowd of player models, all crying in pain as they spray from both ends. The ground begins to fill with blood as more and more characters join in on this horde. Blood, ocean. "It's beautiful, Pop," Ian remarks, in awe of what sits before him. "It better be. I stayed up all night building it." Ian asks why. Poppy shuts her laptop and takes a moment before responding. "Because someone has to call the shots, get all the glory, and someone has to keep the beat." And, again, after a couple classic Ianisms, Poppy tells him that she'll be his Ringo. This is a rather momentous revelation, and I'd like to take a moment to discuss just what this means. This whole season has been spent showing just how desperately Poppy wants to be recognized. She wants to be at the head of the table. She wants to be seen. She wants to be the face. She wants to be the Paul, or John, or hell, even George. No one who has spent the last 8 years vying for recognition only to be used at the expense of a maniacal narcissist could ever be satisfied with being Ringo, unless they realized one thing. Poppy must have realized that without Ringo, the Beatles would have never existed. The others may have written most of the songs, but if it wasn't for him, they never would have been played. Without Ringo, all you have is 3 guys writing songs, but when he works his magic, he's able to bind them all together and make them what everyone knows and loves. Sure, John and Paul may get all the credit, but that credit wouldn't exist without Ringo, and this idea alone can be gratifying. This gives Poppy the ultimate power over Ian, whether he realizes or not, because without her, his vision would never come to life. Without her, there's no reason to shower Ian with so much praise and respect. Without her, he's nothing, and this could be enough for Poppy. Except, there's one small problem. Ian, of course, has a tweak. As Poppy puts it, she's only spent 7 years coming up with this personal epiphany, but Ian has a tweak. That's great. Poppy begins spiraling, opening Ian's windows to share the news with the office that Ian has a tweak. Well, as it turns out, his tweak is that he wants Poppy to serve as his co-creative director. Poppy is in disbelief, saying it's just talk. She tells Ian that it's just going to be the same as it always has been, but Ian wants to show her something. "Come here and check this out," he tells her as he moves his shelf out of the way. "I found this when we first moved in." Ian runs his hand down the face of a cement pillar as Poppy stands behind him. "The people who were here before us signed it when they were building their game, but he fucked it all up because he couldn't listen to his partner." The camera cuts to a close-up on the pillar, and as you may have guessed by now, it says Doc and Bean, DQD, 96. It's interesting. I've seen this episode several times over by now, and I wrote this part of the script days ago, yet when I think about this moment, I still get chill bumps. Ian runs his hand back up the face of the concrete pillar, and right above Doc and Bean's signature, we see his own. Ian, MQ, 2013. He continues, I don't want to do that anymore, so, will you be my Doc and Bean? Poppy walks toward the pillar and stands silent for just a moment. As she goes to carve her name beside Ian's, the same violin motif from the Doc and Bean episode begins playing very faintly in the background. This is the second time when Mythic Quest manages to break me. Not only are they able to resolve the conflict between Poppy and Ian that's been building all season in a way that's meaningful to both the characters and the audience, but they also do it in a way that's meaningful to the show. If I'm being honest, I was afraid for the fate of our main characters after watching DQD collapse for some of the same issues Poppy and Ian have. I was scared episode 5 was a way for the writers to prepare the audience for a less than happy ending. Maybe I'm just cynical, or maybe shows like BoJack Horseman have ruined me. Nevertheless, this is one occasion where I'm happy to have been proven wrong. Knowing what happened with Doc and Bean and knowing that Ian knows their story gives me hope for the future, as if Ian realizes his mistakes, perhaps he can change. He may never be more than the narcissistic asshole that he is, but at least he could learn to make up for that in order to save the things he loves most from falling apart. Finally, after all this time spent toiling physically, mentally, and emotionally, Poppy has achieved her goals. She is finally being respected and revered, not just as a coder, but as an equal to Ian. As the episode draws to a close, we find Poppy and Ian standing in front of what is now their office, as Ian makes his official announcement. Ian hands Poppy his shovel from the very first episode, and as she holds it above her head, the studio cheers, the credits fade in. Poppy has finally gotten what she wanted, and it only took 8 episodes. Things are finally looking up, except maybe not. The credits roll, but they cut after only a short while, and a phone screen fades in. Ian would like to FaceTime. David answers only to find Ian screaming, "It's not working! Poppy is a monster and I refuse to work with her!" It looks like things may still be a little complicated for Ian and Poppy, after all. Well, as it would turn out, resolving their own issues will have to wait. There's a bigger issue at hand now, a new threat, and it goes by the name coronavirus. Yep, you heard me right, COVID-19. Episode 10 opens with David managing a group call between Ian, Poppy, and himself. In fact, every scene in this episode is captured through some variation of this. Each one is shown through the lenses of our own technology, be it our computers or phones. They do this to show how they were able to keep us connected when everything else failed. This filmography style is used incredibly here, as it accentuates every moment we see. We don't just see the loneliness our characters are feeling, the audience actively feels it as well. We experience the pain of being so close and yet so far from everyone you love, right alongside the cast. And when they're able to triumph over the massive divide COVID has caused and find some sliver of light in the pool of darkness surrounding them, we share that triumph. But I'm getting ahead of myself. As the episode opens, we find out that MQHQ has shut down due to the coronavirus. Because of this, everyone is working remotely. As David calls Ian and then Poppy, we notice 2 things. Firstly, Ian refuses to be in the meeting before Poppy because in his own eyes, being the last one to the meeting is a power play. Secondly, Poppy hasn't showered in 6 weeks. These 2 seemingly insignificant details give us a picture of how these 2 are handling their quarantines. Ian, as you may have suspected, has spent this time further strengthening his own ego. His mental state is gradually decaying, allowing the narcissist to take further control of the reins. Poppy, on the other hand, has done the opposite. Instead of inflating herself, she has stripped herself down. She's imploding, having essentially become a zombie, living only for her work. As her psyche collapses, she spends less time focusing on her own self-care and even more time crunching away at her desk. In fact, Poppy is even creating new things for herself to do, just so that she can keep coding. By doing this, she's able to keep motivating herself extrinsically. Thus, it prevents her from feeling the full effect of the pandemic going on around her. Later in the episode, we find that Poppy has just finished coding the vaccine for the blood ocean virus, this being her most recent self-imposed task. As she finishes the last few lines of code and sends it through the compiler, something happens. At first, she's ecstatic, cheering herself on. A moment later, though, the mood shifts. As she sits in silence, Poppy contemplates, only for a second. She quickly shakes off whatever thought manifested, though, as she then sends a message to David. She informs him that the vaccine is done and asks him what to do next, to which he replies, "Stop working!" She clears her desktop, removing all traces of her work. Then she just sits there, silent, her eyes gleaming with fear and despair. She glances around her room. The scene ends. A little while later, we find Ian in the process of video calling Poppy. She answers his call, but leaves her camera turned off. She seems agitated at the very onset of the call. Ian congratulates her for a job well done, saying that they should have a drink together over call. Poppy refuses to turn on her cam, however. When Ian asks her why, she tells him that she just got out of the bath, an obvious lie to anyone who knows anything about Poppy. Ian presses further, but she resists, saying she just doesn't want to be seen right now. Though Ian tries his best, he's unable to de-escalate the situation, and Poppy ends the call, but not before exploding just a little bit. "I just want to be alone. Stop acting like you're trying to help me. This isn't about me. This is about you being too scared to leave your compound, but you still need attention because you're a narcissist." While it is true that Ian is a narcissist of the large variety, confirmed as he admires his physique in the camera after Poppy leaves the call, I do think this line is more of a deflection than an insight. Ian may be narcissistic, but he does care about the people in his life, and Poppy knows this by now. He may need attention, but she does too. That's why he's trying to communicate with her. He knows she's feeling the same way he is, and he's trying to help them both stay just a little more sane. Poppy is too afraid to admit that she needs him though, so she leaves the call. A while later, we find Poppy once again working on the code for Blood Ocean. This time though, her desktop camera is left off. As she scrolls the lines of code, she stumbles upon a message left for her. "Poppy, why are you still working?" She erases it, then continues. Down the page, another message appears. "There's nothing else to do, Pop." She erases it again, this time replacing the line with a bit of new code. Before she can finish though, she gets a call. It's Ian. She declines. As she begins scrolling again, another message appears. "Pick up your phone." She deletes it, then scrolls. This time, she finds a message so large it covers her entire screen. Just then, Ian calls again. This time, she answers. As she does, we find Ian walking outside. Ian admits to Poppy that he's not handling the pandemic as well as he thought he was. He's struggling. Then, after a few moments of silence, he asks Poppy if she's okay. Poppy, still hiding from the camera, gives Ian a non-reassuring, "Uh-huh," but it's obvious something is wrong. He asks if he can see her, but once again, she says no. After begging her to uncover her camera, she finally does. Poppy sits before the camera, covered in tears. Her house completely dark, save from a few bits of light trickling in from her doorway. "I don't think I'm doing very well. It was okay when I still had work, but now that's done and I don't have anything else. All my family are thousands of miles away and I don't have any friends and I'm just alone." Ian attempts to reassure Poppy, telling her it's not true, to no avail. It is. I thought that I could handle this, but I don't think I can. And everyone else seems to have somebody, but I don't. I'm just alone." Poppy begins sobbing again, but Ian stops her. "Open your door." "Why?" "Just open your door." Poppy goes to her front door, and as she opens it, Ian leaves the view of his camera in the FaceTime call. Instead, we see him in the background of Poppy's camera, standing in her doorway. "Hi," he utters softly. "Hi," Poppy responds, her voice rife with tears. They hug. She cries. I cry, even now as I'm typing this. I just watched this episode for the third time not 2 hours before writing this out. I knew exactly what was coming. Still though, as I watched this scene for what is now the 4th time, I moved to tears. Ian tells Poppy he misses her. She reciprocates. Then he asks if she's okay. For the first time in what may be the series so far, she seems genuine when she says that she is. And after he tells her that he is too, Ian leaves her apartment and ends the call. There's something about the message in this episode that resonates with me so deeply. Maybe it's because we all remember what it was like being trapped in a house with no way out, and more importantly, no way to bring others in. Maybe it's because I've struggled with the fear of being alone all my life, and this scenario which Poppy finds herself in is my own personal hell. Or maybe it's because it shows how beautiful the relationship between Ian and Poppy really is. Here we see why Poppy has stuck with him throughout the last 8 years. Here we see why Ian has come to rely on Poppy more than anyone else in his life. Here we understand why Ian and Poppy, no matter how rough things get between them, can always find a middle ground. Ian and Poppy complete each other. I don't mean this in an ooey-gooey romantic way where I'm trying to ship the two together. No, I mean it on a much more fundamental level. Ian and Poppy are two pieces of the same puzzle. The reason they clash so much is the same reason they create works of art when they combine their strength. They're such different people, but in just the right ways, so that when you combine them, somehow they fit together to make one incredible being of creativity. More so than that, they fit together to make one being of serenity. When the time is right, all the pieces fall into perfect harmony, and together they're able to do more than just create. They're able to heal. Without one another, perhaps Poppy wouldn't be as damaged and Ian wouldn't be as codependent. But without one another, their entire worlds would be completely changed. This is the duality that binds them together. They may hate each other, but they also love each other. They may bother each other, but they also need each other. Together, they can do anything that they can't do alone. Together, they are unstoppable. There is one more episode in the first season, but judging by the runtime of this audio file, it looks like I've gone on long enough. That's not to say that the season 1 finale isn't interesting. Truthfully, it's one of the best finales to a pilot season of television I've ever seen. It brings back elements from the entire season and builds them into a joyful triumph that feels well-deserved after the emotional roller coaster we just went through. Not to mention all the main and subplots I completely skipped over in hopes that maybe the show still has rewatch value for all of you out there watching this. That being said, it doesn't really add anything new for our purposes. Rather, it reaffirms the tone of Ian and Poppy's relationship presented in the end of episode 9 and throughout quarantine. So, with that in mind, I'd like instead to take this time and reflect over the 51 pages of thoughts I presented thus far. It amazes me that the writers of this show are able to achieve such a level of depth within just over 5 hours of television that I've written 17,000 words here and still feel like it's only a drop in the bucket of what makes this show great. I'm trying to think about the things I've said and decide if any of it is redundant enough to delete completely for the sake of brevity. And while I'm sure there is, the truth is I can't bring myself to delete a single word, because for every little point I've brought up here, there's 3 more I left out. Not to mention the other 2 seasons of this series, which I left out completely due to time constraints. The truth is, what I've touched on here is just the beginning of the things Mythic Quest is able to do and the emotions it's able to make the viewers feel. I can't even begin to touch on the sheer hilarity going on between all of this dense emotional growth, because it's just written and delivered so beautifully that my description can't do it justice. That's the magic of this show, because that's the magic of RCG Productions. That's why I've always loved their work on It's Always Sunny. I know what you're thinking. Oh great, I just sat through 2 hours analyzing this show. I can't wait to start analyzing a different show, and you're right, I should save this for another time. But I won't. Sue me. The thing I love most about It's Always Sunny isn't the outlandish characters or even more outlandish scenarios they find themselves in. It's not the satirical lowbrow comedy either, though all of these are reasons why the show is great. No, what I love most about It's Always Sunny is that while on the surface it may appear to be excessive or needlessly taboo, all of that is just a mask. It's like bait. They throw it in the water to attract the fish, and then when you least expect it, Bam, a hook rips into your jaw and pulls you out of the water into an entirely new world, a plane of existence foreign to your own. The hook in this instance is the episodic plot of the series, and this new foreign plane of existence, common sense morality. I know I sound crazy right now advocating the use of It's Always Sunny to define your morals, but the truth is, the series manages to do something no other series I've seen has ever managed. It shows that there is a right answer to moral dilemmas. More accurately, it shows that there is a wrong answer to moral dilemmas. But that's the beauty to it. By defining intrinsically negative morals, they've given definition to intrinsically positive morals. By doing this, they've inherently created a sliding scale where morality can be qualified, if not quantified, and compared. Yeah, it may not be perfect, but it's a hell of a lot more than other shows manage. Shows like Lost or Riverdale, which, despite carrying themselves with a much more serious atmosphere than It's Always Sunny, and sometimes even outwardly attempting to answer these age-old questions about morality, they still fail to address them in such a way. That's not to say these shows suck or are inherently worse because of this. You like your shows, and I'll like mine. Don't fight me. I say all of this just to say the following. RCG Productions may be the most talented group of actors, producers, writers, and all-around creative minds of our time. I don't say this lightly, but I'm also just a 21-year-old burnout writing this from the comfort of his smoke room, so take my opinion with a grain of salt. All I mean by this is RCG started from nothing, just a handheld video camcorder and a dream. Their dream was to make content that not only entertained their friends, but had a message. Over the years, their dream became a reality, and It's Always Sunny blossomed into the indie darling of sitcoms for good reason. I only wish more people could look beyond the surface and take their messages more seriously. I have a feeling they feel this way too, as Mythic Quest brings all these subtle notes of emotion and depth and brings them to the forefront, all while maintaining the level of comedy I would expect from the minds of Charlie Day, Rob McElhenney, Megan Gons, David Hornsby, and the entire workforce of incredible writers they've amassed over the years. There's not much more I can say about Mythic Quest here. Perhaps another time, perhaps another video. As for now, I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you to Rob, Charlie, David, Megan, and everyone who has worked to make this series a reality. Thank you to all of my friends for reading this behemoth of a script and helping me make it the best version it could be. Without you, I don't know if I could have made it this far. A huge thank you to my friend over at Dave's Lemonade for not only helping me navigate the technical aspects of creating and managing a YouTube channel, but also giving me the courage to keep working and make this dream a reality. Most important though, I want to thank each and every one of you out there listening right now. If you've made it this far, I want you to know it genuinely means the world to me. All I've ever wanted was to share my voice with the world, to make my voice heard, and now it feels like I'm one step closer to making that dream a reality as well. I hope this video served you all well and that you found some bit of insight useful within the madness of this video. If this is something you enjoy and you would like to see more content like this, please like and subscribe. I have a few more scripts in the works, but I can't do this without you either. Lastly, if you have a topic you'd like to see me cover, drop it in the comments down below. I'm always looking for a reason to rewatch my favorite shows, or even better, a new show to fall in love with. I've officially run out of things to say, which means it's time to go pack myself a bowl. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, you stay classy YouTube. I'm Sofa King,